Thank you, Pontoon team, for inviting me, and thank you to everyone who's tuned into this talk. I wish I could be there in person, but since this isn't possible, I'm pleased to be able to speak to you remotely. I'm Andrea Barrett, and I'm a postgraduate researcher. I look at medical technology, in particular, biotechnologies such as transplantation and immunological therapies, where there is lifelong technological human symbiosis. I use the lenses of philosophy, ethics, and psychology. In my research into the lived experience of organ transplantation in particular, I've noticed some curious conceptual resonances with digital technology. As we've all experienced since March, in a post-COVID world, being able to navigate digital technology has become increasingly essential. Indeed, my being able to speak to you via this recording has been contingent on a multitude of technologies. And as The Lancet reported in August, women have been more likely to bear the brunt of the social and economic costs of the pandemic. This, along with research showing that women tend to feel less confident using technology in a workplace setting, is what makes initiatives like Pontoon, which empower women to upskill, so important, especially now. One of the biggest resonances in terms of philosophical deep dive between organ transplantation and digital technology can be summed up by one word: hybridity. Contrary to popular cultural misconception, transplanted organs remain of the donor's DNA. With every transplant, there is an amalgamation of two sets of DNA. Transplantation isn't just a singular event, even though it's easy to forget with the spectacle of the surgery. After all, our cultural imaginary is filled with dramatic transplant imagery, especially with the heart transplant, where echoes of past cultural violences, like the Indians who removed beating hearts as part of rituals. But in our era of transplantation, the patient magically survives. These kinds of powerful ideas and vivid imaginaries that we have about scientific things can sometimes obscure the bare facts, such as how transplantees are composites of DNA. There's another form of hybridity within transplants too. How, you ask? Well, the coexistence of this differing DNA is only possible through a further, lifelong, biotechnological intervention, the continuous regimen of immunosuppression. Transplant recipients depend on immunosuppression to stay alive. Without it, the body's natural immune system would destroy the transplanted organ, recognizing it as foreign. This lifelong symbiosis with technology is another reason why transplant recipients can be called hybrids. The way that transplant technology creates this hybridity is the same way that we are increasingly using digital technology and becoming hybrids. The way that transplant technology creates this hybridity is the same way that we are increasingly using digital technology. It is through the art of mimesis, imitation, that technology reuses, to put it crudely, materials in order to create a system greater than the sum of its parts. Greater than the sum of its parts. Think of the rare metals that are mined for the latest iPhone or laptop processor, and the way that the camera translates a 3D person into a 2D image, mirror image reversed. The success of navigating transplantation and digital technology alike depend on continuing to play this game of mimesis. Success in the realms of social, the economic, and health components of life are increasingly becoming contingent upon our ability to adapt to digital substitutions for a paradoxically remote but immediate way of relating to ourselves, each other, and the world. Where before we would go to a conference in person, now it is online. We socialize online, we work online, we shop online. We rely on medical intervention to test whether we are sick and to treat us. And are our phones not always beside us as our digital assistants? Our increasing use of digital technology is transforming all of us into hybrids. Our technologies have become extensions of ourselves, to the point that our lives could scarcely exist without them. Whenever there have been differences between people and the varying ways of living life, logic has demanded that it must be fought over until one side wins. In history, we've seen this in war, colonialism, slavery. Difference, otherness, diversity are all framed by this traditional logic as something that needs to be altered to become that which is the same, similar, no longer foreign. Logic likes to alter all that exists until contradiction no longer exists. It's understandable. In a way, we all prefer clarity of mind, and having decided one way or the other over the state of cognitive dissonance and ambiguity. This also applies to how we relate to each other professionally and personally, for they can be emblematic and indicative of if we lean more towards the logic of singularity or the logic of hybridity. Traditional male logic is about either or. It declares truth as singularity. Difference is whittled down to superiority and inferiority, either fact or fiction. However, a rigorous female logic holds that one shouldn't have to choose. It's about and, not or, though or is still allowed within this logic. Otherwise, it would default to the traditional non-contradictive logic. By choosing a contradiction that includes, this logic of hybridity seeks to create a space within the clashing contradictions to allow diversity, without an end result that defaults to conformity to a singular winning side. By remaining open to the unfamiliar, by being receptive to the other, by being more poetry than prose, and seeking to include the usually excluded, this female logic holds space for both the same and the different. It's this logic which drives the more successful reaching out to the disadvantaged within society, for it doesn't forget that there are inherently different lived experiences between people. This principle of hybridity is what has allowed social initiatives, such as Pontoon, to support the most vulnerable. After all, it's not just about going into another's territory and handing out the necessary resources for upskilling to those in need, enabling the integration of the new, with tailoring the education in a way which it can be received by those with differing lived experiences, is essential for empowerment. Enabling the integration of the new, with tailoring the education in a way which it can be received by those with differing lived experiences, is essential for empowerment. The expansion of digital technology brings with it dangers too. And now this is where the female logic of hybridity can be demonstrated in action. The biggest danger of digital technology undoubtedly is that of artificial intelligence becoming self-conscious and waging war on humanity, striving for what is known as singularity, where humanity is subsumed by an entropy of AI. This is where the value of the principle of hybridity really demonstrates its impact. We're using this extreme example, as all smaller examples can fit within the reach of this kind of impact. So, these fears of AI achieving singularity are based on the underlying assumption that our relation to life is as singular individuals, and that life is a battle for the dominance of singular existence. If we embrace being connected, interdependent, and always seeking to find a synthesis of minds by following the principle of hybridity, we can prevent this. Practically glued to our phones, we are already hybrid. We just need to see it and embrace it rather than fight against it, perpetuating a logic that only leads to singularity. So really, this fear of AI is a projection of what we humans have already done, what we've already become. After all, in the grand history of human reason, it was through the application of intelligence, shall we say, artificially abstracted from our other faculties of bodily wisdom and our emotional compasses, made master of all else, which have led us to this point where we've created technologies that could be capable in further specializing one subset of human expression. Our fears about digital technology are a projection of what we've already done to each other and ourselves. We've raised intelligence far beyond our physical selves or our emotional selves. True, visions of an inhuman machine lording over us may be more totalitarian than our current existence, but our cultural fear of singularity is fundamentally misguided in terms of it externalizing the threat onto something other, onto technology. We're already what we fear. We're all responsible as well in this perpetuation and escalation of singularity. Whenever we choose to make an enemy of otherness, difference, diversity, and here I mean both in professional contexts and in our personal interactions. So, I pose here a question for everyone listening. Will we choose to be closed or open? Closeness marks boundaries between self and other. Openness allows a receptivity to otherness, diversity, difference. This is so important because the more ambitious the technology, the greater the contradictions and the greater the need for tolerance of difference. Being more skilled at using a hybrid mindset can maximize the positives of digital technology and prevent potential negative consequences. This knowledge can assist empowerment for those of us who seek to empower others, such as women who are disadvantaged, as well as disadvantaged women themselves, ourselves, for knowing that society needs diversity and will thrive most with it. It means that even if one is different, one has something valuable to offer. Along with women benefiting from digital technology, society as a whole could also benefit from women becoming upskilled. If the digital can be seen as an interconnected web, it's especially important that variety is represented and included without being forced to completely change. This paradoxical principle of hybridity, a female logic that is female and male and trans all at once, can guide us here. By thinking all these ideas through, it allows us to appreciate the challenge that those who are in the business of creating social change, such as Pontoon, are up against. Embracing diversity, just like encouraging conformity, have ripple effects. It's up to us as thinkers and agents of social change to be responsible for the kind of change we are encouraging, especially when we're working with those who are vulnerable. So I ask you again, will we choose to be closed or open, strive for singularity or hybridity? If anything, I hope you'll be curious enough to at least try asking these questions once in your social initiatives and everyday interactions. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to a few ideas from my paper, Organ Transplantation, a way into understanding how digital technology and the female logic of hybridity intersect. I appreciate your listening to this conceptual deep dive. Do feel free to contact me if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to answer any.